You're watching World Championship Wreckage, professional wrestling history the way the fans remember. Brought to you by Rivet City Radio and the World Championship Wreckage YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today's episode:
Bash at the Beach 2000. And yes, I know, DadHat cannot make an intro video as good as Jay Know Wrestling. But I also know that Jay will hate this intro because I'm giving him a compliment. The best intro maker in all of wrestling podcast. Jay Knows Wrestling. Let's give it up for Jay.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of World Championship Wreckage here on the World Championship Wreckage YouTube channel. As always, I am your friendly neighborhood dad hat wearing wrestling fan, joined, as always, by my friend, the Will Gray from Box Spots and Chair Shots over at Rivet City Radio. And in our guest seat today, you know him from the Rest Talk Wolfpack. You know him from, pretty much every show now. I feel like every time I turn on Rivet City Radio, I see Jack just sitting there. I'm like, when do you leave your computer? But also from the brand new show starting tomorrow, August 19th, Boyfriend Time on twitch.tv/Wrestle Talk Wolfpack, aka we now pronounce you Jackson John. So take a gander at that every Saturday night, late night. I think 11, right, Jax? 11.
Yeah, 11 o'clock.
Ish.
Ish.
Well,
give or take 5-10 minutes.
Well, Will's going to get to gloat because Will won again. He's been on a little bit of a winning streak here recently. He's still not beat me, so I'm going to show the chart. The chart has things that have won, but we have not recorded yet, like Raven, because we're waiting on the special guest for that, as well as what recently won the poll, Jim Cornette.
And we're waiting for a guest for that.
Yeah.
So it's 9-12?
9-12. Yep.
Ooh.
Oh, you're not that far behind, buddy.
Considering at one point it was like 7-2. Yeah, I've made quite a comeback.
You have. But this is the first time where I get to go, Will, why the hell did you make me watch something? Why'd you make me watch this?
This is payback for fucking Disco, my man.
I thought the entire time I was looking at it, I'm like,
this was
Disco.
Will's idea. The whole time I've been blaming you, DadHat.
So I am old school WCW as much as I can. My Four Horsemen shirt, my Nitro hat. Like I had to bathe myself in goodness,
in purity, so that way we can talk about this nonsense.
Yeah, this is. We'll get there. We'll get there. So, Will, I'm going to turn it over to you for this train wreck.
There's a couple things to remember, unfortunately, about this time in WCW. And DadHat, you know, it's my favorite time in WCW history because of who was holding their pencil. We were coming in and out of that Kevin Nash reign where he was doing all those historically yucky things I love talking about. And then you get into the mix of all the personalities. You had Eric Bischoff. You had Hulk Hogan. You had Vince Russo. You had all of these guys boiling up, coming out of what may have been one of the worst pay-per-views in WCW history at Great American Bash right before this. So you just look at just the proverbial show, the shit show, as it were. And you think about everything that happened on this one night in 3 hours or 2 hours and 50 minutes of wrestling. And
felt like 8 hours.
It was a long watch. And Jack, you made a comment before about how the longest match on the card was only 13 minutes, 13:41 or whatever you said. So I'm going to start with you, Jax, because you recently watched it. You watched it this afternoon to play catch up so you could hop on in the 11th hour for us. What did
Hold on a second.
Oh,
Allison, you owe me twice.
2. That's twice now.
That's
Twice.
I mean, I've been stood up before, but damn.
It's twice. And she'll still tell you tomorrow that she loves you. I guarantee it. She'll be like, I love you, DadHat. You know that. I was just tired. I was busy.
That's a good Allison.
God, if she does listen to this tomorrow, I'm fucked. Jaxpo, what did you think about watching it today? You had a chance to go through the 2 hours and 50 minutes of torment. You said you wrote down your cards, you wrote down your times.
Wait a minute, hold on. Jax took notes.
Oh, you don't even know. He's got a notebook. He's got a pen.
What have you done to Jax?
He started hanging out with me, and apparently some of me rubbed off on him, and he rubbed off on me. So I learned how to relax some, and Jax learned how to do homework.
Back at the Beach 2000 has warped my fragile little mind.
This changes everything.
I'm going to tell you what my main thought on this whole pay-per-view as a collective was. Booker T had two of the best matches of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Him and Chris Kanyon going 10 minutes and then Booker T getting a little bit of a rest and going another 13 and winning his world title. That, if there's no other reason to watch that pay-per-view, watch it for those two matches because he ran, like, to me, he was an Iron Man that night. That's the one thing I take away. Everyone takeaways the lay down and everything. I took away like shit. Booker T worked his ass off.
Yeah.
The dark side of the ring, like, it changed so much of the perception of this because everybody remembers it happening. Everybody remembers Jarrett laying down. We're still going to kind of go through the card, but everybody knew when they saw this on the poll, the bulk of the conversation was going to be what happened that night. So before we kind of dive into the card, I want to talk about it a little bit more. But I'm going to ask you, Justin, my friend, DadHat.
Yeah.
I'm going to play devil's advocate with you. I've been thinking about this question all day. Okay. And this is the Will Gray question of the night. Very first thing right off the bat. Okay. What if everybody has the perception on Hogan that he was the bad guy? I'm not going to lose to Jarrett. I have to win. Right. But what if it was because in the back of his mind, he knew that a Booker T victory over Hulk Hogan would mean a hell of a lot more than a Booker T victory over Jeff Jarrett?
I mean, you're not wrong in that and everything. Then
maybe present it like that versus just this doesn't work for me, brother.
I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, like no. Like if you were gonna put it on Booker, a win over Hogan means tremendously more over Jarrett, and I'm a Jarrett fan. And even this was, to me, I'm taking TNA out of it because I mean he was booking himself at that point. In Jarrett's solo career, this was his highest accomplishment and highest time for his career is this WCW run. Vince Russo booking all of that, slap nuts Jeff Jarrett. TNA outside because he booked himself.
Him and Daddy held the pencil. You can't be mad at him for putting himself over.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, him a win over Hogan would mean tremendously more. If Hogan would present it like that, fine. Let Hogan beat Jarrett in a, let Jarrett still look strong because he is there week to week, but. Fine, then let Hogan win, but then it's immediately let's get a promo from Russo right then and there after the win of like this isn't happening again. No, it's a different time now, Hulk. You now have to go. You get a rest, but you're coming back out and you're defending it against who should be. Just kind of take verbiage from his promo, like. Who's been busting his ass for the last 14, I don't know if it says 14 or 17 years in this company, Booker T. And you are contractually obligated. That would have been more. I would be far more okay with that pay-per-view. As a whole, if that had happened.
Jax, is this the most Hulk Hogan thing Hulk Hogan ever hulked?
That needs to be a t-shirt.
It sounds like it.
Like, was this the most, like, he's famous for this doesn't work for me, brother. Like, he did it in WWE. He did it in AWA. Like, he was historically known. He fucking probably tried to do it to Inoki in Japan, but just couldn't because there was a language barrier. Like, when you think about the fact through his entire career, he's known for going, that doesn't work for me. I want to do this instead. And he takes the reins of all of his creative. Is this the ultimate Hulk Hogan way of doing that? By just being like, no, I'm not going to put somebody over who deserves it. I want to be the champion. And even if he did have good intent on letting Booker T over later in the night, like, was this just Hulk Hogan waving the proverbial D around?
Yeah, this is Hulk Hogan going, I have this in my contract. You can't do this. Like, this was
Although I
Hulk
do
Hogan taking the
go ahead,
pencil
Jax.
himself.
Yeah.
This is just Hulk Hogan taking the pencil away from the pencil.
Then, DadHat, we got to look at the two guys that were running WCW at the time.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you had Nash, who wasn't as involved in the booking at this point. This is the tail end of it. Then you had Eric Bischoff, and you had Vince Russo. If you've watched The Dark Side of the Ring from a couple weeks ago, you realize that it was flip-flopped. Initially, Bischoff was the boss, and then later in the 2000s, Russo was the boss. So you had this eternal power struggle between maybe two of the most polarizing minds in wrestling in the 90s, because one guy was the creative force to beat Vince McMahon, and one guy was the creative force that put the dagger, so to speak, in WCW and nailed the coffin closed on him.
Yep.
What do you think about Bischoff and Russo in 2000 at this point? Going back now, having seen Dark Side, having rewatched Bash, even begrudgingly as much as it was, like, thinking of it as a wrestling fan now, because the slogan is, you know, history the way the fans remember it. Looking back on it, has your opinions changed of what happened that night changed now because it's 23 years later?
The Dark Side of the Ring was interesting. I liked kind of how, and Lance Storm, I'm going to butcher his words, I mean, he kind of summed it up at the end and everything of, you know, the Hogan knew what he was doing. He knew his contract wasn't going to be renewed. This is a way that he could leverage to get another payday, you know, orchestrated it. I mean, why it didn't, when legal action happened, it didn't get very far. But looking back, I remember when the whole like New Blood storyline started and Russo came out. You know, Russo had been unseen. You'd hear his voice, but he'd be behind a desk with backstage segments for a couple of months. Well, then he's out in the ring, and so they debuted the whole new Nitro set and everything. And then he calls out Bischoff. Well, I remember when that happened and saw them in the ring, and that was just storyline wise. I remember as a kid, I was a teenager, thinking, well, that's not going to work. Like, I wasn't super smart on the business, but I mean, I at least knew, you know, this is the dude that, just like you said, the mastermind behind the biggest moments of WWF's career, and the person who tried to put WWF out of business working together. I'm like, this ain't gonna work on camera, off camera, anything. I don't know. I think that I don't know. I think it's still good. I mean, even with Dark Side coming out and like new information from that, I still think it's going to be labeled as as you put it, Hulk doing the most Hulk thing that Hulk could do.
Yep. 100%. Jax, when you watched The Dark Side and you thought about it, like, overall, did your opinion on Russo or Bischoff change when this information came out? Because as I said before, two of the most polarizing opinions. You either love them or you hate them in most cases. There are very few people that are just like, lukewarm on Bischoff or Russo. Yeah, bro. Did your opinions change at all?
Looking back at it, when I was younger, I really could give two craps. But looking back at it, I wanted it to work. There's two like third generation's minds working together. WCW could have been viable.
Yeah.
But I think both of their egos of no, I'm in charge got in the way. And like DadHat said, you just knew from the get-go it wasn't going to work.
You learn I watched The Table for Three recently because I saw a clip on TikTok. Have you guys ever watched that on Peacock?
Oh, I love Table for Three.
Did you watch the Jim Cornette episode where it was him and it was him and Bischoff and what's his name? Michael P.S. Hayes. Wasn't it Michael Hayes? Wasn't he
I
the
think
third
so,
seed?
but I mean,
It was either him or Bruce. I'm
not
pretty
seen
sure
that
it was
episode.
Michael
I've seen
Hayes.
that, but I don't, not recently.
And Cornette, he delivers a line, and he's like, "You realize that talking to Bischoff, that you and I have ever only met one time before today, because everybody thought they were these huge, like, polarizing minds in WCW who were going back and forth, but they only worked in WCW for one event together, and it was in the '80s. By that point, you know, Cornette had moved over to WWE and stuff by the time Bischoff. And then you think about the fact that in the '90s, those are the three names. You get Russo, you get Cornette, and you get Bischoff. Looking at the three of them, this is a loaded question for both of you. Who did the most damage to the business at that point in the '90s? Because we're talking about Cornette in a couple weeks. We'll talk about all the great things and not so great things that man has done in his career. Then you look at what Bischoff has done, who helped build a company from nothing, topple the biggest company in the world for 83 weeks, and then ride off into the sunset ultimately as it sells off. Then you have Vince Russo, the mind in the business, that without him, we would have never had the Attitude Era. We never had any of these things. So you look at all the great they did, but they're always kind of shat on by the fans. Like, this is one of those situations. Like, if you had to pick the worst of the worst, who do you think's the worst? Cornette, Bischoff, or Russo?
Man, that's hard. Like, you know, I love me some technical wrestling. Like, you know, I love me some Bret Hart, some Bryan Danielson, like some Lance Storms. Like, I love me some technical wrestling. But you could say Vince Russo because he took that, threw it out the window, and just like he said in the Dark Side of the Ring episode, the way he formatted it, short match, vignette, backstage segment, short match. He took those long
A fight in the locker
matches.
room.
Yeah. He took all those good long wrestling matches. Those are out the window. That to me hurts the business. But then you look at Bischoff, and Bischoff he did something that nobody else has done. He almost put the biggest company in the business out of like just gone. If they could have held on, WWF would have been gone for good. Which is even weird to think now, all these years later. But Bischoff to me is to me was the start of ruining kayfabe for me. The giving away matches for stuff like that. Like, it's small things, but I mean, it was the start of that. Like, let's look behind the curtain. So to me, that does some damage as well. And then Cornette, I mean, I'll save my Cornette stuff for Cornette when we get there.
It's tough to talk about it. Jax, do you have an opinion about it? Let's leave it to Cornette. We'll move Cornette out of it because he's on my mind right now because we were just talking about him. I was doing some research. Looking at it for Russo and Bischoff, because what we're about to dive into is going to be the decision. When you look at it, do you think which one of them did the worst damage on the business? Would it be Russo? Would it be Bischoff? Because this point in 2000 WCW, like, we see the writing on the wall. We know that the end is nigh. We know that it's only a little bit of ways. Like, the boys can see it in the way it's booked, the way it's they're going. This is the start of what did they say in the last Nitro, DadHat? He said that it's not my fault they booked their show at a dive bar in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the beginning of the dive bar phase where they're working community centers and, you know, not high school gyms, but kind of working high school gyms again.
Yeah.
Who do you think was more at fault, I guess, is a good way of asking this question, Russo or Bischoff?
As much as I like him, we're going to have to say Bischoff. Bischoff was the generator of all those lucrative creative control deals that got them into the situation they were in. So, and it's, to me, it boils down to, as much as I love his booking and I listen to his podcast, I think by giving them those big contracts that were very open, like, hey, you control what you do, man. We'll follow your lead.
Yeah, no.
Should never have been a thing.
Now, the decision was the story was Hogan and Jarrett and how they were going to get to eventually getting the belt to Booker T.
Mm-hmm.
you had Russo saying, this is what I wanted to do. And you had Bischoff going, this is what I said I wanted to do. Then you had Hogan, and it was just this mess. And people say there's 3 sides to every story: side 1, side 2, and the truth. In this story, there seemed to be 4, because there was Bischoff's side of it, there was Russo's side of it, there was Hogan's side of it, and somewhere convoluted between those 3 stories is the truth.
Maybe you could probably add a 5th. There's Jeff Jarrett.
You could because even Jarrett was like, he said it in the dark side. This was supposed to be the biggest moment of his career, and he felt like nobody really gave a shit about what he wanted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he was dropping the belt. He had been the champion. Like, I'm going to have this moment. And instead of asking me, what do I want to do with it to protect my title reign? He just kind of felt like everybody was just like, you're just transitioning the belt, kid.
Yeah.
You're like, nobody
They're
cared
pretty
about
much.
Yeah. So
if you look at it from the dark side of the ring standpoint, you do really see, as they explain the couple scenarios that they threw out there, Hogan and Bischoff wanting to do the, he leaves for a while and there's a tournament and everything. Very old school wrestling, right? Then you have what Russo wanted to do, and literally the lay down, the argument, put it on Booker that night, right? Crash TV. It all has to happen right now. There can't be any suspense. And it's the conflict. There's your conflict right there. Old school wrestling mentality, Crash TV.
do you think Russo, this is an opinion that I had after I had a chance to interview him. I talked to him about this day. And one of the opinions that I had on Russo after talking to him, getting to know him a little bit since I interviewed him, the man was getting paid to do his job.
Mm-hmm.
And he was getting paid to do his job well. He got hired by the biggest company in the world, and then he got offered more money to go to their competitor, and then he got offered more money to go to TNA, and then he was also consulting for WWE. So was Russo just doing his job really well, and he's just the proverbial heel? Does everybody just hate Russo because that's the cool thing to do, is to hate Vince Russo, when in reality we praise the shit that he did? Because I said it to him. I said, people talk a lot of shit about what you did in the wrestling business, but people are still talking about what you did in the wrestling business 25, 30 years later. Was he just doing his job, guys? Was that all Vince Russo was doing? He was just doing his job to get eyes on the screen and butts in the seats.
Jax?
Yes, I think that at the end of the day, I don't hate Vince Russo. Like, I don't believe he had anything to do with the Montreal Screwjob. That's just my opinion. But I think at the end of the day, you're right. He was trying to write what he was hired for, Crash TV.
Yeah.
That's all. Like, he came into W from all the stuff and all the documentaries and the shoot interviews. It sounds like Vince Russo WCW wanted him and said, hey, duplicate what you did on WWF, Crash TV, make it crazy.
And he did.
And he did. So, yeah, at the end of the day, he was just doing his job, and he had to fight. He took that job having to fight an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a big disconnect, too. People look back fondly on the Attitude Era from the World Wrestling Federation. But you don't think Vince Russo when you look back at, like, the DX invasion and everything from that. So he might have been responsible for a lot of that writing that we remember very fondly. But when you think back of that, your mind doesn't go, Vince Russo.
Yeah.
Out of sight, out of mind. You think Vince Russo, you think, okay, he's on my television. That's like what he did in front of my 2 eyes. So I think that's a big thing. There's a big disconnect.
I get that. Believe it or not, guys, I don't know if you know this. There was actually a card at Bash at the Beach in 2000.
Yeah.
There were wrestlers. They had matches. Like, there were a few. There were 11. Well,
I have notes.
10 if you don't count the match. But 11 matches total, including multiple titles.
A cinematic match.
A cinematic match, which was unique.
Yeah.
Jax, what did you say earlier? I was when you were watching it earlier, I was in there for a few minutes. You said the graveyard match was the cinematic match before it was cool.
I was like, because we were describing it to Tommy, and I said, I was like, this is a cinematic match before cinematic matches were the thing to do.
Yeah.
And gotta love Charles Robinson and his flashlight, which was, if you noticed, was just about as big as he was.
Yeah.
Running around with
Like,
one of those
I'm
big
gonna stay
police.
here. Wait for me.
But it was entertaining.
It wasn't. Let's start at the top and we'll kind of dive through it. We talked about the big bulk of it with everything that happened with the Russo stuff. Then we get into the matches themselves. We had a cruiserweight title match. DadHat, Lieutenant Loco, and Hoovy. Is this the same cruiserweight division that we grew up loving in 96 and 97?
Action-wise, yes. Storyline stuff around it, hell no.
Not even close.
The MIA, which I forgot was even a thing. A lot of time, like the whole MIA, filthy animals. Like to me, they interweave so much in my brain that I forget who's and what. But like, like Lieutenant Loco. I mean, it's Chavo Guerrero Jr. Like, how could you're disgracing a
That was
Guerrero.
Chavo?
Yeah.
I thought that was Lieutenant Loco.
Like, how dare you disgrace a Guerrero? Like, you know, I love me some Guerreros. It's one of my favorite wrestling families of all times. Action wise, yeah, but the silly, they're running in presidential masks that you see at Halloween and everything. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
Just WCW becoming cartoony and clowny. The stuff that melted them down and you know, put the nail in the coffin that we keep talking about at this point.
Let's take away from the craft of professional wrestling and make sure we add in that it's that entertainment side creeping in. Everything has to have entertainment part of it.
Jax, what do you think about the cruiserweight title match?
It had good scenery at one point.
I don't even remember what her name was.
I don't either, but it did have good scenery. I went into it hoping for a lot more than what I got out of it, to be completely honest. But it was a decent. I give it a 2 out of 5.
2 out of 5?
I give it a 2 out of 5.
This seemed like a very run-of-the-mill luchador match to me. Like we don't ever do grades, but since you know Jax did, I would say between 2 and 2.5. Like very good, not great, just a run-of-the-mill. Like it was a good opener. It wasn't a bad match, but 12 minutes of luchador. That's what it was. And it was a WCW card. So you kind of expected like that one luchador match. Big Vito Norman.
12 minutes and 7 seconds.
I'm never going to get used to Jax being more precise than me.
I can't believe he has
I just had to do it at least once tonight. I'm sorry.
I feel like he's just doing it to mess with me at this point. Like
we're just setting it up just so you're like, what the hell?
Before we move on to the next match, can we talk about the horrible running storyline throughout the entire show of Ernest the Cat Miller?
Dude, that was awesome.
Like whatever that group was called, I forget what they said their name was.
When you look at it, Jax, you and I have talked about this before. We talked about the Ninja Turtles on Broadway thing they did where it was like the Ninja Turtles performing on stage and then they did the backstage like vignettes up on the video and it was like explaining the story behind the scenes, what was happening when the show happened. Anytime I see wrestling do this reminded me of like WrestleMania 18 where they were running around with the hardcore title in between matches and like every match had a hardcore title match between it. Like that's kind of what this felt like, where it was just lots of filler stuff as the pay-per-view went on because they needed to put people on screen. Like this is just one of those weird booking things in WCW at the end that just didn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, I do like WCW's hardcore rules though. How it has to start backstage and finish in the ring.
Yeah.
You know,
Not
because
the
that makes
false count anywhere.
That makes complete sense.
That opens up a whole nother question of whose hardcore division was better, because WCW had different rules with their hardcore title than WWE did.
And I like to say Vito was one of the best hardcore WCW champions because we're mutuals on TikTok.
That's why I say Crowbars, because he's one of my buddies.
Y'all are chasing the hug. You know who doesn't chase a hug? Me, because I got called a hoe this week by Alex Kane.
You did, and I've made it a point in 3 different social media posts.
Oh, I know.
Like, Alex Kane called DadHat a hoe. It was awesome.
He called you a hoe?
He did.
You were on the show.
Live
that's
on the interview
right.
over
right, he did
pineapple
call
on
you a
pizza.
hoe.
I was like, DadHat says pineapple does not go on pizza.
He said, "DadHat, you're being a hoe." Yeah.
Yeah, DadHat, you a hoe.
Being a
I
hoe.
love you, Alex Kane.
Hardcore title match. Big Vito, Norman Smiley.
I love Norman Smiley.
You can't go wrong with him. He's that like dancing around Jax.
It was a Vito made this match a triple threat match.
Oh yeah, with Ralph
Against it, so it was technically
Ralphus.
Norman's. We can't forget Ralphus is my spirit animal.
I didn't remember him being with Norman. I just always think of him as the whole Jericho security. Like,
well, I'm your Ralphus now.
You're not my Ralphus. You're like you're like the Triple H to my Shawn Michaels. You're like the Billy Gunn to my Road Dogg. You're not my Ralphus, man. I love you more than that.
Hey, Ralphus was over.
He was over as fuck. It's like Matilda with the British Bulldogs in the 90s. Like, that Bulldog was the most over member of that tag team, without a doubt. So we talked about the hardcore title rules, start backstage, go into the ring. Big Vito, big fan of the show. He's mutuals on TikTok. Once again, you know, look back
he
at
wants
it.
to come on here. We just got to figure out what time
Line
to get him
something
on.
up. I would love to get him on specifically to talk about this hardcore title.
Yes.
But looking back at it 23 years later, again, kind of the same way we did with the Russo, Bischoff, Jarrett stuff. Did this age well? 23 years later, going back on a WCW hardcore match, like, what did you guys think about it? Looking at it, like, stylistically, the way the match worked, hardcore wrestling then versus in 2023.
Oh, it's totally different. Nowadays, you're beating the shit out of each other with light tubes.
Fair.
It was a watered down hardcore. That's not like I will say I agree with Vito. Vito did tremendous. I mean, he did great with that title. We had Terry Funk at one point with it. I mean, how can you dispute Terry Funk?
Facts.
Crowbar. I mean, great names holding this title and everything. It just felt like with WCW's hardcore division, they were just trying so hard to keep up with the Attitude Era hardcore title in WWE and what ECW had done. And like, it's like, we want to try to do this, but we can't because of the network and sponsors and stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, great wrestlers, not necessarily the best hardcore matches.
I think this match had more good backstage, and then when it got out to the arena, it kind of exposed it. You know what I mean? This was the opposite side of it. They were doing a great job in the back, and then when they got out in the front, they more time in the back, more of the hardcore stuff, less of the in-ring finish. And then the finish pinning, not pinning Smiley, making it a triple, like the whole thing where he made the match the way he did, and then he pinned the other guy and he didn't pin Smiley. Like, there was a little bit of screwiness in the finish, but like, since we're grading this, Jax, what'd you give this one?
I gave this another 2. This gets a big old fucking 2.
Just a 2? DadHat, where you at?
It was
entertaining. Was it better than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre death match on Wednesday
Nothing
night?
will be better than Terry Funk with a raw chicken.
That I have said it. I have said it on social media. That is the start of Jeff Jarrett's push to the AEW World Title. Do not disgrace that match. And it gave
If
us
Jared Jarrett comes
Leatherface.
walking out with that belt next week, I'm going to shit.
As the deathmatch champion in AEW.
Yes.
God, I hope Nick Gage shows up and just takes it from him. You do not deserve this.
I'd stand with Jax. I'd give it 2. You rate 2. Wait, are we rating him out of 10 or out of 5?
Out of 5.
Out of 5. It's Jax's rules.
Jax's, it's like Raven's rules, but we get Jax's rules. Yeah, I'd give it 2.
A 2. I'd say 2. A strong 2.
Strong 2.
A strong 2. We get a vignette next with Goldberg and Scott Hall's contract and all of this stuff, guys.
The most disheveled looking contract that like
This is obviously a multi-million-dollar deal. It looks like your kids. Honestly,
it looks like my kid literally played with that piece of paper, crumpled it up, and tried to straighten it back out when he got caught playing with it.
I'm the guy in my school that would just cram everything in my backpack, and then I would turn it in. It looked all disheveled as fuck, but then my teacher would grade it, and I would get an A. But she hated the fact that everything looked like it went through a tornado before it hit her desk. That's how I felt like that. Looking at that contract was kind of like my spirit animal, because I was like, I bet that contract's still worth something. But Jesus, dude, a 7-figure contract should probably be like in a folder or something.
Anytime
you would think.
Anytime we see a work contract on any wrestling television, I try really hard just to read what it actually says. Like, so much. Like, they always make sure the names are really big, and I'm like, I'm trying to read everything else besides the name. Like,
you remember when the FTR stuff was floating around and Dax pulled the one over on everybody and put the fake WWE contract on his desk and all of that, and they were just trolling us because he had all the title belts in the back, and you saw the red one and the blue one and the NXT title, but you couldn't make out, like, the AEW title was like kind of cut off on the edge. Like, and he had I was like, if you've ever seen a real fucking contract, you know the logo's not on the lower third like that. Like, this is obviously just a piece of paper, guys.
It got me, so you can
It won't for long, Jax. We're working on it.
I mean,
you're gonna be the smartest mark in the wrestling business before long.
I mean,
I'm taking notes.
I mean, if my tablet here was the contract for the Scott Hall contract, and yes, I have a bunch of wrestling stickers on my tablet. Get off me.
I do it too. My planner's covered in them.
Yeah, it was literally like WCW's logo was about here. Scott Hall's name was about to here, and then ready.
And it's like this huge deal worth all this money with all the underwriting and the fine print and the logistics and legal, and it gets summarized into this folded, like, paper clipped 2 pieces of paper shoved in his pocket. Like, we're supposed to buy this is the contract.
The best part, though, I'm sorry, is one, Goldberg comes out and they're tucked in his trunks. But when he lays it down the table in front of Tony Schiavone and Scott Hudson and what's the other guy? Madden, right? Is that
Madden was in the booth for this one.
He's so sweaty or oiled up. That contract ink, it is smeared. Like, you can't even read it. Like, you can't even see Scott Hall's name hardly. It's crumpled up. It's soaking wet. Like, it makes it even funnier.
That much DNA. That much DNA negates any legal contracts. I'm saying. Go ahead, Jax. I'm sorry.
Can we also point out the fact that he ripped the front page off and ate it originally?
Yeah.
And magically it had another front page on it.
Yeah, right.
It's magic of TV, Jax. Get your logic out of here.
Kayfabe, baby. Kayfabe.
Shorthand magic.
After that came maybe my favorite match of the night.
Canyon Booker?
No, it was the evening gown or the wedding gown match. Wasn't the wedding gown match next?
Yeah.
10! Fucking
10! Daphne and Crowbar with Miss Hancock and David Flair. We literally just talked to somebody, a.k.a. Crowbar, about the build for all of this when he was going through all of this with Daphne and David Flair. And then to watch it live, I was like, oh yeah, we were just talking about this. So honestly, that's why I graded this so high, because it was cool, because we kind of had the curtain pulled back for us. We knew what it was like while he was working with Daphne and how much fun they were having. So even though it was only 4 minutes, it was just a filler match. This was the get your popcorn, go to the bathroom. This is just for fun. But in reality, listening to Crowbar and Daphne, listening to him talk about the fun they were having, made that 4 minutes dude, they had a fucking blast. Everything they were doing right now was nothing but fun. Jax, what do you think?
I love this match.
10.
Yeah.
Fucking 10.
I honestly, I gave this match a 3 because to me, they made chicken salad out of chicken shit, because it was actually kind of enjoyable. With the ref being pantsed, I kind of got a
Crowbar
giggle.
disrobing himself.
And then Stacy Keibler starts dancing. They sit down and they're back and forth like little kids. I was every bit about it was this is why wrestling's fun to me.
This was the comedic effect match of the night. This was the old school, Southern wrestling side of the card. They put this on there because they needed to get, everybody needed a break, give everybody a chance, make the crowd laugh. And then we're going to come back with a tag team title match.
Which
I do give the crew cleaning up the cake a negative 18, because y'all not know how to clean up cake. They're literally just as lightly with a rag, with their foot, oh, why isn't this cleaning anything up? I'm like,
they were,
and then later, then they were just
what
we're gonna do? We're just gonna flip it over, and you realize that later when it gets exposed,
yeah.
You could hear. I'm like, whoever was backstage, you can just tell them they were just just turn the thing the fuck over.
Just flip the mat over.
Yeah. I was just like, why are we watching them clean?
I did a time lapse on Wednesday of them flipping the ring from Ring of Honor to Dynamite, and then from Dynamite to Rampage. Because one thing I'm impressed with, as many Mud Show and Outlaw indie shows as I've been to, I'm always impressed as to how quickly those guys can flip a ring. Because you would be amazed, indie shows, how much trouble they have getting their ring up and set up. And I applaud people like New South and Invictus and Limitless that have these stellar ring crews that can get them up so quick. Because then you watch something like AEW and they're like ants, 100 people running around the ring, and then 5 minutes later it's totally different, and it's amazing.
And it's almost, you don't even realize, all of a sudden you're just like, oh, that's a different ring apron. Oh, that's a different it's just so much chaos that all of a sudden you're like, there's the clear picture.
The wipe in film, instead it's real time. It's just the wave of people that come down through the ramp, and it just and then by the time they reach the other side, it's a totally different setup.
Yeah. And
it's just the slow wipe. But in 2000, that wasn't the case, because like I said, they wrestled in cake the rest of the night.
Yeah.
The tag team title match, Brian Adams, Brian Clark, Chronic, the perfect event, new tag champions, second longest match of the night.
Yeah.
Do you think this was the match of the night, guys? They got the most time. They did arguably the best in-ring work from 4 guys that you didn't expect when you look at the rest of the names on the card. You didn't expect these 4 people to be the ones to put maybe the match of the night out.
So I'm going to be honest here.
Yeah.
You know me, I work a lot, right? I got a soon-to-be 5-year-old and a 6-month-old. What do you think happened when I was watching this show the first time around?
You got interrupted.
Oh, I know. I fell asleep, buddy.
During this match?
Yeah. During the entrances. I remember Chronic coming out. Next thing I know, they're walking out holding belts. So, yeah, sure, that match happened.
That match happened. Jax, what did you think about the tag match then, since DadHat took his nap here?
I personally like Chronic as a tag team.
Oh, I did too. I remember loving
favorite tag teams, and it was shocking seeing them get the second most amount of time in a match. And I understand because it is Actually, it was the only tag team match on the card.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand them getting a little extra time. I gave it a 3.5 because those guys actually went in there and worked. I forgot who the perfect event was until they walked out, though. So
Sean
it's like,
Stasiak, Columbo.
these guys.
Two of the guys that got. We'll get
Sides.
to the invasion a little bit, but these are two of the guys that just started to make a name for themselves, and they were like, "Oh yeah, by the way, everybody's fired. You got to get a new job with a new company."
It was Palumbo and Stasiak to me. Like I always really liked Palumbo. Stasiak, I was always just kind of but like Palumbo, Stasiak, O'Hare, those were my big three that like, and Vampiro. Like those are my four. Like as we head into like the new blood era of WCW, I'm like, that's where you build your company around. There's your four. There's your pillars.
Their pillars. I like Vampiro. He's in the NWA now.
Yeah.
He's like knee deep in their tag team division, like helping La Rebellion, their tag champs, second longest reigning NWA tag champs in history, and it's happening right now. Good tag team match, quality match, only tag team match of the night. So they had to, it's hard to be the worst match of the night when you're the only tag match of the night. Positively Canyon and Booker T. This is one of those things where you knew that it was going to be a banger. I didn't remember watching this match as a kid, so watching it now, especially having done our episode on Chris Canyon and the botch spots and chair shots after dark on Chris Canyon, like I knew I liked Chris Canyon as a kid, but now I'm a huge Chris Canyon fan as an adult. So rewatching this match and watching him work Booker, 10 minutes. They looked at these guys and said, y'all got 10 minutes, go out there, do your thing. They worked 10 minutes and 4 seconds. Like two dudes hitting their times.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Take my glory for knowing the 4 seconds.
I looked it up. I honestly, once I realized you had it written down, I pulled the match card so I could see the times now. So that way my notes of about 12 minutes aren't going to be corrected by 12 minutes and 7 seconds, assholes.
Jack, you're still in my gimmick here, man. I'm supposed to be the one that's supposed to be correcting Will on things. And
I honestly gave this match a 5.
Yeah,
really?
It was, to me, the best match on the card.
I agree with that.
I would definitely say so.
I don't like the positively Canyon, where he's just ripping off everything DDP. But I mean, no matter what he's doing, whether he was Mortis, we did a whole damn episode on him.
Yeah,
you put him in a ring, you get gold.
It was always Chris Canyon, no matter what.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the innovator of offense. Everything he did, Booker T was just starting to really shine as that main event world. He had already been killing it. We talked about the Best of 7 series and the TV title helping push these guys into the main event picture. So by 2000 now, Booker T's like the man, and he's getting ready to be the man, as we'll see at the end of the card. The Scott Steiner Mike Awesome match, this was my bathroom break. I didn't really mess with this match a whole lot. Like, what did you guys think about it? It ended with a DQ finish. Like, it was kind of screwy. Like, honestly, like Mike Awesome.
You say those two names too, and I wouldn't usually think, okay, bathroom break. But I agree with you with that. Like, I love Scott Steiner. I love Big Papa Pump. I love Mike Awesome in ECW. Like, he was okay he showed up in the invasion angle as well and everything, but in ECW he was great. Screw finish to be screw finish.
Jax?
This was honestly, I agree with Will, one of my bathroom matches of the night. Guys, I hate to be completely unprofessional, but I have to step away for 2 seconds to give my dad his shot.
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay. I'll be right back.
I'll watch for you to come back. I'll take you off screen.
Thinking about where Scott Steiner is at this point in 2000, and then where we watched him go to the final Nitro a year from now.
Yeah.
Was this like he didn't need the build or that push, but like he's getting ready to be thrown into that main event picture and to win that title, to go into what was the final Nitro against Booker T and all of that. Like, what do you think about where Big Papa Pump was at this point in 2000, knowing where he is a year later at the last Nitro?
I mean, he's been Big Papa Pump for a while now and everything, but you know how we talked about, what was it last week, where I don't remember what we were talking about, where he was just, there was Scott Hall. There's always just someone else or a few people just above him.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how kind of Scott Steiner was for me. Like, there was always just some others above him, but until we get to the end of WCW. And then, okay, there's not really that many more people above him. So he's one of our most tenured and name recognizable with the company. I mean, he's jacked. So, I mean, why not? So, yeah, I mean, I was glad that he got a world title run. I had super high hopes when he showed up in WWE, like with the holler if you hear me, the alarm, everything. I had and being in tremendous shape, and then that didn't go well, of course. But I'm a Scott Steiner fan. I'm a Steiner Brothers fan. Like, they're probably the reason why I love tag team wrestling so much. Like,
them and LOD for sure.
See, I was so much like, everybody always puts LOD up there as like the top tag team. Yes, I agree with that and everything. Looking back, hindsight and everything, because I went back and watched more of their stuff. But to me, like, from the get go, Steiners, man, I was always such a big Steiner fan because you had a little bit of everything. You had the athleticism and the technical stuff with Scott, and then you had the character of, Rick, like
the bulldog on a leash, pretty much.
Yeah, like with the wrestling headset and being a bulldog and like the stance and everything. So you got a little bit of everything. You got that entertainment with that technical aspect, and so I was always a big fan of them. I remember having their little figures, like their little original figures of those. But let me bring Jax back in. Yeah. Hello.
We were rounding out the Scott Steiner conversation. Then we go into the graveyard match. This was the cinematic match. Jax, you and I watched the majority of this match together earlier when you were on your watch through. Kind of the same thing. Let's look back at it 23 years in hindsight. We've seen, the Undertaker and AJ Styles. We've seen the Firefly Funhouse. We've seen the AEW stuff with Sting and those guys in the warehouse. We've seen all of these great cinematic matches. Jax, earlier you said it was the cinematic match, before cinematic matches or whatever. Like, what'd you guys think about it? Like, overall, having a chance to see Vampiro work, and then you get into who the hell the Kiss Demon was. Like, what a decision that
Fever
was.
Dream, right?
Like, I forgot that was a thing, that they made a character who was ultimately just a ripoff. It was literally the Kiss Demon. It was just a Gene Simmons knockoff.
Mm-hmm.
And Vampiro, who was one of, maybe one of those coulda, woulda, shoulda U.S. title, world champion kind of things if he had been booked a little bit differently.
With the China ripoff, Asia.
Mm-hmm. What was the lady's name that was with the demon?
Asia.
Was that Asia? Okay, yeah. Okay. And then you had Little Nate.
Little Nate.
Jax, you and I were talking about it when they were running around the lighting for the graveyard. And I get wanting to shoot it at night for obvious things. DadHat, you've got the background in theater and film, and you understand how important lighting is. Could they have done something just a little bit better than Little Nate's running around with his hand lantern, like shaking? Because you saw the light. It was just like shaking the whole time.
Yeah, they could have easily used gobos. They could have set up lightings, and I mean, everybody doing any type of content or social media, they know ring lights and everything. A gobo is literally like, they can have ones that make shapes. Like, I could pick, say you have a full full light, full lamp, right? And I want to. It's like the Batman signal. Like a gobo would be the cutout to make it, or they just have gobos that are colors. You could have done a dark color, a dark red, a dark purple, or something that is going to feed into the atmosphere, but giving you more light to read what's moving on screen. So yeah, like that needed to be done instead of being like clearly they're not going to do if they're on their camera, and they're not going to use the bright white light there because that's going to just be like washing everybody out, and it's going to be too much, too strong. But something more. You see, you look back on it, and then take that, and then take another one in a graveyard, and look at the one with AJ Styles and Undertaker. Look what you can do when technology and film equipment and stuff advances.
Jack's graveyard match. What'd you think?
I enjoyed the hell out of it because it was, for the time, something different. It was this match probably should have went on more towards after Daphne and Miss Hancock. In hindsight, give them time to clean up their mess. But
yeah,
the demon coming out with a torch that was a sword was cool. How Vampiro throws it into the grave. I thought for what it was, cinematically, they did a pretty decent job for the time.
The sword was cool with the flames, and when he poured it back, you could see it dripping fire. I was like, that's kind of cool. And then he ran up like he was going to stab it in the casket. And I was like, okay, this. And then you're like, this is cool. This is cool. This is cool. And then Vampiro's sitting in the fucking tree like he's a leopard.
Yeah.
And he jumps out with the biggest oh, here I come.
I love Vampiro.
Whoa!
I love Vampiro.
It was 2000s WCW, right? This surprisingly wasn't bad. They worked well considering they were fighting in the dark and the mud with little Nate shaking. But good, not great, but kind of the same thing. You look at what was happening in WCW in 2000, quality work, just poor execution on stories and stuff. And that seems to be the mantra.
3 or 4.
I gave it a 3.
I would say 2.5 would be the most average match, just the most average run-of-the-mill match. I would definitely say this is between a 3 and a 3.25. You know what I mean? Just a little bit better than just a regular average match. The adding the graveyard element, all of it, they had upped it a little bit with some lighting and stuff and a little bit of production value. This could have been a 3.5 or a 4, easy. You give them the production value of today's wrestling, Vampiro and the Demon could have had a hell of a cinematic match in 2023.
Yes, they could have.
We've got one more match before we get into the push of Jarrett taking it and Goldberg and all of that. It was Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell's boys. Shane Douglas gets the win. It's an 8-minute match. Or how long was it, Jax?
7 minutes and 52 seconds.
My notes say 8 minutes.
I round up to everything. So
me too.
Well,
it's 15 till noon. I'm gonna say it's noon.
Yeah, 100%. I like how precise Jax is now. I love it.
It weirds me out. I'm really bothered. I'm gonna wake up feeling itchy tomorrow.
You're going to be like, I'm not going to be the most prepared person on the Wolfpack on Wednesday now. Fuck, I'm going to have to start working.
Oh, no, I know I am on that. So.
Oh, no, he's going to be the most prepared person on Wednesday on the Wolfpack.
Jax is like, I'm good. I'm just not
we have an interview. I'm emailing them questions.
2 people in this match, 2 very different careers. One of which is still in the headlines today, good, bad, or indifferent. Let's start with Marcus Buff Bagwell, guys. Marcus Bagwell. Polarizing character, NWO. He was one of those. Is he just another X-Pac? Just a mid-card like backup dancer for your Hollywoods? And
the NWO. Everybody talked about I said this in the Worst of the War episode I recorded. The oversaturation of the NWO. The NWO helped Bagwell. It helped move him from being Marcus Alexander Bagwell
to being
into buff and finding a character, and finding something that he could sink his teeth in. He wasn't just an extra person. He was featured. There's the injury and everything with Rick Steiner. That whole storyline that helped propel him and everything. But the NWO oversaturation helped him. But I'm not surprised he was one that got pulled over in the invasion not long after this. But to me, y'all, this was my bathroom break. I hate it for the names in the match because I like them, but this was where I was like, and yawn. Like it wasn't even Shane Douglas. He was the franchise. Like
Shane Douglas.
No, he wasn't even when he comes out, it doesn't even say Shane Douglas. It says the franchise. And that bugged, and he in the interview with Gene Okerlund backstage, it was the franchise. The franchise does. It's like, I'm like, you're not The Rock. You're not talking in the third person here, dude.
Jax, you got anything before we get into the show that was the show?
I gave it a 2. It was a match. It was there.
Standard 2.5. This was a 8-minute wrestling school match. These guys went out there, they called 8 minutes on the fly, and then they walked to the back and collected their paycheck.
Yes, sir.
We get to the meat and the potatoes of the show. The last 3 matches are the Hogan Jarrett match, or what was supposed to be the Hogan Jarrett match. We the first half of the episode, we dissected what we thought about it. Now that we're here on the card, did you guys, watching it again, leading up to the Bischoff promo and, that asshole will never work here again or whatever, like, did it just suck all the air out of the building? Like, because I felt like it kind of did. I felt like watching it happen, you could feel it in the air. The fans didn't know what was happening. The commentators either did and really oversold it, but like, this sucked every bit of oxygen out of that entire place. Because it seemed like nothing happened after this that mattered, because everybody was left with that what the hell just happened to taste.
Yeah.
It was. I had the privilege to watch it with someone who's never watched it today. And they're a wrestling fan, and he goes, "What is he doing?"
Yeah.
And so I had to explain it to him. He goes, "He's giving the business away." I was like, Well, I mean, if you look at it, I guess so.
He kind of just exposed it. He just laid down. He let the other guy take the win. Jarrett knew there was nothing he could do about it. There was nothing he could say, no fight he could win. He was the low man on the totem pole between Russo, Bischoff, Hogan, then Jarrett. He was the fourth opinion that was going to matter. Did he expose the business by just laying down, by just doing it, not putting up a bigger fight, not going out there and having a match anyways, like by doing what he was told from Russo, who was his boss, whether you think that's the way it went down or you disagree or any otherwise? Did Jarrett expose the business by just going out there and laying down?
I mean, at this point, I think the business was already exposed.
By 2000? It's still real to me.
I mean,
I say that so often now.
To answer your question before, like, did it suck the air out? I have a horrible comparison. And I don't mean it to compare it in terms of, like, the events, but I think it's similar in terms of what it does to a crowd. The death of Owen Hart. After that, no one cared about any match necessarily in the crowd. They witnessed something horrific, and that took the fun out of being at a show. Here, nowhere, not even close to being the same thing, but it sucked the air out of the arena, and it was like, it's not really fun to be here anymore. It's not like I don't care about what's going on anymore.
I liked in the dark side how they told us that Russo sent a repo out to the ring for Hogan because he wasn't going to give Hogan the actual belt. Like, that was a cool little anecdote that I didn't realize until I watched The Dark Side, that he sent a reproduction out to the ring because he wasn't going to give Hogan the actual title.
And then Bischoff says later, that is the real bell, has the bend. I've seen it for years. Or not Bischoff, Shivani says it.
Yeah. But see, this is those things where you always get into that, like, you know, half full, half empty, who's lying, who's not. Because you look back at it, and this isn't me being negative about wrestling at all. But the more I learn about it, the more wrestlers I meet and the more people I interview, the more I realize, like, this is a bunch of carnies who started in the carnival and still are carnies. Like, the whole point of this business is to make money. And at the core of it, that's what everybody wants to do, is make money. And I think this is one of those situations where you see it even in the biggest stage and the brightest lights, no matter what, this business boils down to dollars and cents. And that's what it was about that night. It was only about money. And you got all these stories and lies and back and forths. And I said this and he did this and we did that. And we get 5 different stories about what happened that night. And this is kind of a joke, but I say this jokingly. How come nobody asked how the fuck we felt? What about the fans?
Well, how did you feel?
15-year-old Will was kind of like everybody else. Like, what the hell did I just watch? But 37-year-old Will, almost 38-year-old Will is going, you've got 10,000 people in this arena who literally just watched Vince Russo come out and just take a dump on the biggest star in your company by name, so much so that he gets sued over it. From that one promo, he gets a libel and a slander suit put against him. Like, looking back at it, like, why would you want to do that publicly? That's like if a chef gets mad at the owner and he walks out and starts screaming at the owner in the dining room. Like, that's what it reminded me of. That was the most I say it. I support Russo. He was just doing his job. That was the single most unprofessional thing that man could have ever done, was to walk out there in that moment and do and said what he did. It was the most unprofessional thing he could have done. No matter who's lying, who isn't lying, the truths. That was the worst thing Russo could have done, was walk out to the ring and cuss his world champion out. Promo. Yeah. And say the things that he did about Hogan and about the business and about the company. So that just feels yucky. It sucked the air out of the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I made you guys have this.
I'm like, are we? It's like, so the next match.
Yeah. So that's it. That's the end of this. No, Goldberg's Kevin Nash, 5.5 minutes. Jax, what was the actual time?
5:27.
We talk about Hogan having to get a win over somebody again, right? Hear that a lot throughout his career.
Yeah.
I put him over, but when do I get my win back over him?
Yeah.
That's all this was. Goldberg's got to get his win back over.
Yeah, that's all. Right. It was a typical Goldberg match with a dumbass.
Teenage me loved Goldberg, superhero Goldberg, like crushing everybody, killer, different finishing move. Like, the spear was different. Nobody else was doing it. I'm looking at you, everyone in professional wrestling today. Quit using the spear.
That's a super kick.
It's a super kick. And the jackhammer was awesome and different. Looking back on it now, I'm just like, no.
Nah.
Well, you left such a sour taste in my mouth this week.
DadHat's like, I don't even want to do this show anymore. This is how I felt after Disco. We do get in on a good note, guys. Booker T wins the world title.
Yeah.
And second best match of the night, third best match of the night, Canyon, this one, and then the tag match, right?
Yeah.
I would probably, like, looking at this one up until this point, if the whole card had been this good, we could have had a totally different outcome for WCW. It was like a shimmering light of brilliance in like a sea of garbage. It was a good executed match. And the two best match of the night had Booker T. I feel like that's worth saying, right?
There's a reason why you put your card on that horse. Like it's
obvious why they did it the way they did it.
You're moving. I mean, the whole New Blood storyline. It made sense. The veterans were coming to an end. It was time to showcase the Bookers, the Vampiros, the Scott Steiners.
Shane Douglases.
Yeah.
Like
the Hangman Adam Pages.
Where the fuck did that come from?
It was under my desk. I don't know why.
You ruined the business.
Oh, mine are over there. So hold
on.
It's a wiener.
It's a corn dog.
It's a pin.
It's a pin?
It's a pin.
That's even
Where did you get that?
Sonic.
I knew it as soon as I saw it. That was a corn dog.
I'm going to my local Sonic tomorrow.
They have all these different back to school.
I'm going to my local Sonic tomorrow. I have notes with the corn dog pin.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, overall thoughts. Seems to be a whole lot of 2.5s and 3s going through this card. Overall, do you think this is a 2.75 pay-per-view? Maybe a 3 if you think about it.
I ain't giving it a 3.
2.5, 2.75? What are you giving it?
2.5.
2.5? DadHat?
2.
You're going to give it a 2? You're not even going to give it a mediocre. This is below average.
2.
I'll say 2. I'll say 2.5. I'll give it a 2.5. I'll say it's average. For WCW in 2000, this was about as good as it was going to get. Is the quintessential mediocrity in World Championship Wrestling. So that's it. I made you do it for an hour and 10 minutes, DadHat. I made you talk about Bash at the Beach 2000. We did it. We discussed Russo and the boys. We went through the card. We had Jaxbo with us. I'm going to give you your show back. You're like, I can't wait for you to stop winning these fucking polls, Will.
If I have a migraine tomorrow,
I'm going to get a text.
Yeah. If I have a migraine tomorrow, I'm going to blame you.
From the store, it's going to be like, my day's ruined, and it's yours and Hulk Hogan's fault.
The next to last Saturday before back to school. Yeah. It's going to be a long day. It's going to be a long day tomorrow. So that was a show, ladies and gentlemen. We talked for an hour.
It was a show.
Minutes. No, I'll never hate anything you pick. Is that there's specific things in that late WCW time frame that I love. Like I love Vampiro. Like I said, I like Stasiak and O'Hare. There's just a lot of you got to dig through a lot of mud to get to those you got to
find those diamonds in the rough.
Yeah,
there's a lot of mud.
Yeah. But first off, we always got to plug stuff. So, Jax, where can we find you and what you got going on, buddy?
Buckle up. I call myself the king of plugging. You can catch me on Tuesdays
that sounds kinky.
Yeah, it is. On Rivet City Radio for nerdy news, and back there on Sundays for bot spots and chair shots. You can catch me on Wednesdays at the Wrestle Talk Wolfpack. You can now catch me on Saturdays on the Wrestle Talk Wolfpack for boyfriend time.
I now pronounce you John and Jax. Will, what's going on with Rivet City Radio and bot spots and chair shots?
Lots of cool stuff coming. Got some interviews. I just dropped the interview Jackson I did with Alex Kane. I've got
where he called me a hoe, ladies and gentlemen.
He did.
A hoe. It's on the internet forever.
Yeah, it's on the internet forever. DadHat's a hoe. I've got the Super 8 champion from 2021, Eric Dillinger, coming up this week. If you're really interested, if you check my link tree at the Will Gray, you'll find all of my shenanigans for botch bots and chair shots, for Rivet City Radio, Off the Top, Creation World, WCW. Anything that I do is there if you want to find what I'm up to at the Will Gray.
Perfect. Well, everything we've got going on here, guys, it's been a busy busy last couple of weeks for World Championship Wreckage. One, besides we got everything that we've been putting out for the last several months. Besides Wreckage here, back in the day with XLJ, PWN Reacts with Mr. B-Roll, Icon with Husky Rhodes and the Silverback Nate Slater, but a lot of the new stuff that we announced with our 100 sub celebration has started rolling out. Monday Night Madness with the boys, Ethan, and on the Forklift Crew. The first episode drops. Episode 2 will drop this Monday. Queen's Court, first episode there, where they're looking back at Monday Night Raw from the very beginning with Husky Rhodes, hosted by Bree Stout, aka the Tribal Queen, and Mike Duplessis has dropped. We just filmed tonight. I produced and XLJ hosted the first episode of Fantasy Warfare, featuring our buddy Self Bet Wrestling against the WrestleTop Drip God himself, Hambone.
That's dope.
In a battle of the Monday Night Wars, which was super cool. That will actually be dropping tomorrow. I'm going to literally edit it when I get off here. But there's, of course, as always, find us, go on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, WC Wreckage Pod. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, all the good places for our weekly poll and everything. So we're gonna do. I'm gonna throw a curveball at Will. So Jim Cornette won, but we're gonna wait because we have somebody who really wants to be on that episode. So we discussed that next week's episode will be a live episode on Thursday after trivia and everything. So I'm going to let Will pick between two things. Both are watch-alongs. So
Okay.
You have to watch along. So we are heading into my favorite time of the year that was in WCW. Not Halloween Havoc. That's number 2. But before that, my favorite thing in wrestling ever, War Games.
Ooh.
So we can either watch War Games 98, which was Warrior and DDP, of course, winning his number 1 contendership for that year's Halloween Havoc against Goldberg. It's Jericho versus Mini Goldberg. Bulldog getting hurt in the match. Like, War Games 98 to me is a fun one. People crap on it. Or either one of these I'm fine with. We can go back into our infancy, right? NWA Great American Bash, July 1987. Watch that whole pay-per-view, which featured the War Games match of the Road Warriors, Nikita Koloff, Dusty Rhodes, and Paul Ellering versus the Four Horsemen, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Lex Luger, Tully Blanchard,
and J.J. Dillon. I forgot they put the managers in the first War Games match until you started reading it off. Yep. Let's watch that one. Let's watch the original War Games.
So we're talking Great American Bash 1987 next week.
Yeah.
Talk some old school stuff. Will and I were 2.
I wasn't even 2 yet. Is August of 87?
I was soon to turn 2. So I was I'm September. So I was 2 months away from being 2. So
DadHat's older than I am. I'm just throwing that out there now. I'm old, but DadHat's real old.
Hey, this is camera ready beard. Let me take a quick mascara and color in the gray for the camera.
We gotta do what we gotta do.
When I went and had my beard trimmed, the barber that was cutting my hair, she made it a point to be like, I cut all that gray out, but there's still a lot. And I was like, can you fucking say that? Like, you're not supposed, you can't say stuff like that to me.
You can't say shit
Tell me
like
how
that.
Cute I look. Tell me how good I look.
They can say whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. So we will do that next week on the live Thursday edition of.
I'm going to be in the chat
Wreckage.
heckling the hell out of you.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine.
I'll send you a link and make you get in the show.
Let the man enjoy some time off of a camera.
I actually enjoy my time on a camera, sir.
He enjoys work again.
Well, so does your guest star.
I enjoy actually working.
So do guest stars that you have visiting you in your home, but that's a whole other story, buddy.
Hey. I got to keep it exciting here at the Castle Ninja.
The Castle Ninja.
The Casa de Ninja.
It's Casa de Ninja.
All right, folks. For the Ginger Ninja Jaxpo, for the Will Gray, I am your friendly neighborhood dad hat wearing wrestling fan saying we'll see you next time. As always, we are ending with wise words from the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, baby, I got one more thing to say. Your gas tank is full. Your dipstick is in. Your windows washed. Y'all come back and see me again.